The mausoleum was built for Priscilla Host, who was the mistress of Lord Kilmorey. And the story goes that Lord Kilmorey, he had a wife in Ireland and 4 kids in very quick succession, in 4 years, 4 children basically. Then they fell out, separated, and he moved back to London. He then became the guardian to the children of William Host, who was one of Nelson's captains. William Host was quite famous apparently, but he died of TB, nothing dramatic, just TB. Anyway, William Host left several children, and the youngest child was Priscilla. She was 5 at the time. So Lord Kilmorey, I guess he was an establishment figure or a neighbour, I don't know quite what the relationship was with the wife of William Host. But then when Priscilla became 21, he ran off with her to France, pursued by the brothers, wielding guns and cutlasses, presumably. But there was a huge scandal about it, and couldn't come back for a while. When they did eventually come back, she had a child, but then she died when she was about 35 in 1853. So she died in 1853, having had the boy, and he was then about 8. And in the mausoleum, there's a big relief sculpture in white marble of Lord Kilmorey, Priscilla on her deathbed, looking very wan, and the sun at the head of her deathbed, and an angel above. It's really lovely, and it's supposed to be a very good likeness as well. So the mausoleum was actually built before she died. Well, it was constructed, it was carved before she died in Scotland, and then they shipped all the bits, we think, via the Thames, first to Brompton Cemetery, where it was erected in '54, and then after about 6 years it went to Weybridge. He moved house and he wanted to have her at the end of his garden, so the mausoleum actually slots together. Where there are pink and grey bits in between, there are grooves, and there are little fillets that fit the 2 sections of marble really closely together. You can see it on the ground plan. So it's like a big Lego kit, it just clicks and unclicks. So it went to the end of that garden, and then he sold the house and moved to Gordon House, which is over there, and the mausoleum came too, and she was reinterred in the mausoleum. I'm standing on top of the tunnel that leads from Lord Kilmorey's meadow under the Kilmorey Road, and then comes up over there. A couple of years ago Thames water broke through, but they've lost all the records. The tunnel's quite old, it was there before he built the mausoleum, and he seems to have aligned the mausoleum with an existing path rather than the other way around, which is what we thought. There was a beautiful masonry arch, which apparently is still there but buried, unless the new development people have, I suppose they could have just demolished it, but it was there in the 70s. The story goes that Lord Kilmorey used to practice, well, he said he practiced being dead. What he actually did was he used to go in his coffin, in his shroud, from his house. He was pushed on, they said on rails, so he was actually pushed in the coffin from the house, under the tunnel, up the other side of the road, down a processional way, which lined up with the front door of the mausoleum there. The route of the processionary way appears to be down that row of houses, and then across through that block of flats there. And it went up through that new estate, turned right and curved into his grounds, to his house. If the tunnel is directly underneath the road, the bottom of the tunnel has got to be about 6 foot, at least 6 foot down, and that means the ramp must have been quite a massive ramp. If you think in terms of a coffin being trundled down and then up the ramp.
We don't really know why he did it. He used to joke about it, and in the local press of the time, in his obituary, they said this is why he did it. But there is a good theory that maybe he was trying to reenact the Osiris myth of rebirth. We won't know that really, but it's quite interesting that in 1851 there was a big exhibition at Alexandra Palace, and the Great Exhibition, and there was a huge amount of interest in Egyptian style stuff then. And there was also a lot of interest in the spiritual world, and they were beginning to read the hieroglyphs and understanding that the pharaohs were trying to reenact these resurrection, rebirth myths. So it is possible that he knew of this and he understood it and was just trying to recreate it, to try and commune with the soul of his dead beloved, dearest Priscilla. And if you go to Brompton Cemetery, there's actually quite a few similar shaped mausolea. There is a famous Egyptologist there as well, who was very interested in the afterlife. And there are said to be links between the shapes of these mausolea and, say, Doctor Who's TARDIS, because it's the same sides with a little pointy roof. There are quite interesting similarities. So, who knows? And it's very, very small. It's 1/3 of an acre. And that includes the mausoleum. The walls are only 52 metres. It's a triangle. And each wall is 52 metres long. It looks much bigger because we've hidden the walls. So people are surprised. Basically, it's that shape.
And then this is centralised, isn't it?
It's central relative to the angles of the walls. He's angled it.
Yeah.
The wall itself, that low wall and the railings, they obviously came from somewhere else because you can see the original fixing points. And when you look at the original plan from Brompton Cemetery, which is where it was first erected, the layout of the wall was slightly different. And it makes more sense of actually how the design was done. It's obviously been cropped slightly for this position. There's also stories of another tunnel from the back. Tunnel entrances have been found there. But all the witnesses are quite elderly ladies. They're all people in their 80s now. And I know one in particular got muddled up, talking about the tunnel which we know was over there, which we know people saw. We've got lots of drawings and lots of eyewitnesses for that one. And they all correlate. But she was saying she'd seen that somewhere else. It's possible it's true, we don't know. It's very difficult to know. We need more people to come out of the woodwork, really, who knew people who knew people. Ideally people who've taken photos. We do have photos of the tunnel under Kilmorey Road from the inside. The mausoleum was given in trust to Hounslow Council in 1935-1936 when the land was parcelled off. The rest of the estate was sold at that time by the trustees of Lord Kilmorey. The mausoleum was already in a bad state and the roof was already leaking at that point, according to reports of the time. So within, 50 years of his death, it hadn't been looked after. Wasn't settling, but there were problems with the roof. What happened then was that the area was basically locked, just opened once a year for Open House London. And the grass would be cut the week before for that event. In the late 80s, early 90s, the council boundaries changed. So instead of Hounslow being in charge, Richmond took over. And they cut down all the remaining railings. There had been damage due to the storm in '87, but the railings were still intact-ish. They were all taken down and taken away to Orleans House for storage. Half of them have gone missing. We don't know what happened to those. The rest have come back, but of course they're rusting away. The inside of the mausoleum is now in a much worse condition than when we first started getting involved in 2002. The reason for that is that the roof leaks have not been repaired. So the roof was leaking badly until 2002. It was fixed shortly afterwards, but the repairs failed because they didn't use the right sort of techniques. And unfortunately, it had passed the indemnity period before anyone realised that the roof was leaking, because the key was kept by the council and we weren't allowed to have the key. Then, when the volunteers who'd taken over looking after the garden realised what was going on, we insisted on a key so that we could check the state of the interior and air it, because the coffins were saturated. The water was running down the walls. It was dripping on the coffins. So we used to come in every week and air it so that it was gradually drying out. However, it was still leaking. So the coffins were drying out, but it was still leaking. We got it fixed again, but it failed again. It was finally mended properly in the autumn of 2012. But it's been leaking since the 30s. So there's staining on the inside of the walls, which is now crystallising out as salts. The coffins have been saturated for decades. The red velvet is rotted away completely in some places. They were covered in lovely red velvet with stud work, and there were little angels, winged angels. This is all corroded away. The wood of the coffins is corroding. The lead obviously is all right. I think more damage was probably done in the last few years than in the past, because the roof so badly leaked after the so-called repairs. English Heritage have offered to fund partially the recasting of the railings and the gate, but that depended on the building going on to the at-risk category, or at least the wall and the railings, the low wall and the railings. This didn't happen for several years. It happened now. But for some reason there's no funding from the council, even though the building was left in trust to them. The building's grade 2 star listed, which is a really high, it's the one below 1, you know, it's a high listing. But it's just a crime that, you know, it's slowly decaying, just by being forgotten. The council came in November 2012, dug a big pit round the base of one of the pillars to find out why they're leaning. We've got 4 of the pillars, the pink pillars are leaning because the foundations aren't good enough. They dug the pit in November 2012 and it's still there, it's still covered with a piece of wood. Nothing's happened. The rendering was all taken off the low wall because they were going to replace it and sort out the coping stones. Nothing has happened again. And we know that all the costings have been done. We know that I've seen the plans. So, why? Not everyone likes it. The building's a bit like Marmite. Either you love it or you loathe it. Whatever you think, though, it is an outstanding building. It's one of the best Egyptian-style monuments in London, in the country. It's now become a magnet for local people. People are coming from all over the place. We get visitors from all over the country coming to see it. We're open once for London Open House in September and again in June for local people, so that we have just local advertising and all the locals bring their friends. So those are our 2 official open days. But we have thousands of people visit because we have hundreds of school children come on a regular basis. We get groups coming from Mind, the local mental health charity, and they help with the maintenance of the IV and stuff. They do things. It's a very quiet and gentle place. It's noisy just here with the road, but at the other end, it's very, very peaceful. It's like a little haven for people who are troubled. We have people who've got learning difficulties. We have students, overseas students who are studying English as a second language. And for them, it's just peaceful. It's away from all the troubles of the world. We get scouts coming with torches to look under the logs, looking for bugs in the evening. We have, as I said earlier, we have hundreds of school children come because it's safe, there's a wall. We can lock them in if necessary. They can hunt grasshoppers, crickets, They find slugs and snails and ants and all sorts of creepy crawlies that children these days just don't have that experience anymore. It's awfully frightening. Lots of young children come with their families to our library activity days, which are held at the other end where it's very peaceful. And they'll make masks, they do storytelling, and it's peaceful. What we've tried to do with design is to create a sacred glade, which is surrounded by trees with wild plants. So we've got wild roses that are real wild British roses from ancient British hedgerows. We've got wild flowers in the meadow, that usually flowers at this time of the year, planted by children. We've got grass and seeds that have come from very old English Surrey meadows. So we've got the genetic pool here that you just don't get elsewhere. And this means we can then give people the seeds for other projects. So we're passing on our genetic stock to other projects. But there is supposed to be poltergeist activity happening at the minute down the road where the tunnel comes up towards the Gordon house end, which is his house. Someone's built flats and houses across that access route, which was the processional route. And that particular flat is now having a lot of interesting, they reckon it's a poltergeist or a ghost. So we don't know. But no one will babysit there overnight anymore. There's been so much activity.
Really?
Yeah, seriously. I've got a really long email from someone who came in, was really shocked. Yeah, she was really shocked by it all and completely spooked by it.